my really big problem with, like the person first language stuff is not that I object to actually using it or anything or presenting somebody that way. As like somebody that has autism, for instance, or was diagnosed, I don't have a preference one way or the other about that. You can start with autism if you want, or you can call me a person with autism. I don't really care one way or the other. What I have an issue with person first language is just I feel like most of us wouldn't have even been tuned into that in the first place. And what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there wasn't really a grand effort that was made to make sure that everybody understood that they needed to shift to it. It just suddenly kind of came out of nowhere and started being enforced. And anybody that didn't conform was called a bigot, like, Mercedes Lackey was. And then everybody acted like there was no valid excuse for not being up to date on what was the modern parlance and, considered to be the socially acceptable, language that was politically correct of the day. And I just feel that this is in of itself a form of injustice because of the fact that, we, it's not as if even among the people like myself who don't really object to trying to conform to politically correct language, if there isn't like some kind of alert system to the fact that these discussions are taking place and that people are talking about the desire to shift to this and everything, then it starts to piss me off for like the very simple reason that at the end of the day, like most people, this is not something most people care about, and because it's something that most people don't care about, most people weren't even in the room for most of the discussions that took place with person first language and everything because it wasn't interesting to them, so they didn't see these conversations take place. And even among the people who would advocate, hey, we should be more politically correct, it's not as if there was a system in place to make sure to bring all that to their attention, that people wanted to do this. And there were not great efforts made to bring everybody up to speed on it, all of it. It was just something that I guess you were supposed to stumble into on your own and figure out for yourself. And I just think that that's just not a sane, coherent, or fair way to do anything and everything. So, like, my position on all of this is, fundamentally, like, neutral. But I do have one really big objection to person first language, which, like I said, is that I feel like the expectation to conform to it was just foisted on us out of nowhere. And that foisting and everything, and it didn't really do a good job of making sure like a woman like Mercedes Lackey would have been brought in and up to speed about all of it. Like efforts were not made really to any extent to make sure that somebody like her or somebody like me would have even noticed all this. And when I guess YouTube, I guess there are corners of YouTube that have talked about this stuff, and that there's a lot of posts on like Facebook and everything. But again, those discussions may not have been something that I, was pertinent to my interest, and so I may not have come across them. Especially because the way the web works on a fundamental basis is that it shows you more of what you're already interested in. And so I wasn't really keyed into person first language. I didn't really care about that stuff until one day I realized that, this is connected to the PC culture, where it's connected in such a way that, people that don't want to be bigots and don't want to be seen as such and hurt other people's feelings and everything are tuned into this and everything. And that's when I started to get interested in all of it. But I don't like that it presented itself that way to me because of the fact that I feel as though, this shift happened in a way that was so clunky. It reminds me of the patchwork nature of the 50 states, where every single one of them has their own approach to solving a problem, and so standardizing it across all of them, and in cases where that needs to happen, becomes a very difficult challenge when everybody wants localized control to do things their own way and everything, like they do with like the science of learning and reading and everything. Springs to mind, and problems related to localized control over the districts, where these districts may or may not actually implement it in a way that actually conforms to the latest findings in cognitive neuroscience and everything about how people learn how to read. So my in essence, my problem with this is that the way that the rollout of this happened was not in a well organized fashion. It was not sane. It was not an approach that really it really transpired in a way that was coherent and would have made sure that you know everybody was up to speed. And it's only natural that Mercedes Lackey would have called the guy Samuel in that situation a colored person rather than person of color because of the way that the way that like that discussion was taking place. Maybe some of it was taking place on YouTube and everything, but again, YouTube is programmed to show you more of what you're already keyed into and interested in. So a lot of us could be on this platform, just following our own hobbies and interests, and we never would have come across that language on our own naturally. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it didn't roll out in a way where it would have been fair for the other author to hold her to that standard simply because of the fact that it was a very disorganized and broken way in which the rollout of expectations happened. I mean, we didn't really have a meeting or anything as a society where everybody would went down to like the school district or an assembly center somewhere and we had a big discussion about this sort of thing. Especially because the governments were often going to try to cram this down our throats and everything and say that we should use person first language and everything, and that a lot of states want you to do this because that. So in essence, as a critic of all of it, I don't really have anything to harp on about the language itself. I guess there could be something to be said that it may be more considerate to emphasize that a person is a person and everything before you talk about what it is. But again, I just wanted to say that this did like the rollout of this change didn't happen in a way that was sane. The process of all of it didn't happen in a way that was well organized or anything. And so it makes me angry and realize that it's a form of injustice to hold people to the standard of actually using it when most people aren't even aware of it. They're not keyed into it. You know, I by some miracle I got keyed into it, but that is just because of this controversy that took place with Mercedes Lackey and the fact that you know I'm actually kind of pro political correctness for the because I I don't want to be an inconsiderate asshole. I don't want to be running around bruising people's feelings for no discernibly good solid reason for all of it. I don't see a good reason to be an inconsiderate asshole. You know what I'm trying to say about all this. I don't want to be perceived as a bigot. And those are concerns that are totally valid and everything. And I think Mercedes Lucky happens to share that sort of sentiment. But again, I think she kind of fell through the cracks, and it would have been very easy for somebody to fall through the cracks because of the way that the rollout of first person language happened. And so it's unjust to demand people use it when they don't even know. They haven't even been brought up to speed or into the conversation about person first language, when nobody's told them why we're making this shift or that it's important, or you know so that's my problem with all of it. Of course somebody like her at 73 years of age would have fallen through those cracks. It's not surprising.